Can you imagine Hamilton transforming Ferrari from within with a signing that nobody saw come? What if I told you that this secret movement could completely change the course of the 2025 championship before the Hungary GP? What Vasseur has just revealed is literally madness. This integration is more revolutionary than it seems, because it's not just a matter of affinity, it is efficiency. Ferrari has historically been a team full of talent, but also afflicted by internal struggles, lack of coordination between departments and fragmented technical decisions. Hamilton understood from the beginning, if he wanted to win with Ferrari, he needed more than a good car. I needed a structure that worked with the same precision as Mercedes' Swiss watch. And that is where DL becomes a key piece. His deep knowledge of German methodologies, his familiarity with Brackley's simulation systems, and his experience in the development of the power unit make him a bridge between two very different engineering philosophies. Hamilton did not bring him just to feel comfortable. He brought it to catalyze a change, to introduce a different mentality in Ferrari, a winning mentality obsessed with detail, intolerant with improvisation. All this happens in a context in which Hamilton has already begun to openly question certain decisions of the team. In several recent statements, the British pilot has mentioned that he is challenging the team, questioning each adjustment, and looking for new ways of interpreting the data. This is not a confrontational attitude. It is the way a champion acts when he seeks to gain time. Because in modern Formula One, the real time is not won alone on the track. It is won in the factory, in the data sheets, in the way in which technical decisions are prioritized. Therefore, this play is not just a change of engineer. It is a turning point. Hamilton has begun to mold Ferrari in his image. And the most disturbing thing for its rivals is that you are achieving it without raising your voice, without making noise, simply building something bigger than a season. A long-term winning structure. The 2025 season has made it clear that Ferrari is going through a decisive moment. It is not only irregular results or isolated failures in the car. What is happening in Maranello is much deeper. It is a process of technical and philosophical self-discovery. Ferrari, for the first time in years, seems to face a crossroads between two paths: continue with its traditional approach, full of hierarchical decisions and short-term strategies, or reinvent itself from within under the pressure and vision of figures such as Hamilton and Fred Vasseur. One of the most problematic elements of the SF25 is its brake system. Hamilton described it as a lottery. Literally. In his own words, "We throw the dice and put some records in work, you put others in not." This statement, which might seem exaggerated, exposes a very serious technical weakness. Because in Formula One, where braking is an essential part of the performance, especially in circuits such as Hungary, which require high precision in each braking area, not being able to trust the system is almost a judgment of defeat. And here an even more disturbing appearance comes in. This problem is not new. It was already affecting Ferrari since the previous year. However, for internal reasons, it was not addressed with due urgency. It was not until Hamilton, after his arrival to the team, began to insist on the need for a structural solution that the problem began to receive the attention it deserved. But even so, the advance has been slow. The design of this suspension is ambitious. Modify the front arm of the upper triangle with a downward inclination to increase the anti-quad effect, which should improve the stability of the car in acceleration and curve outlet. But it is not a magical solution. It requires an extremely precise tuning and a perfect interaction with the aerodynamic soil. And that is where new complications arise. For the Hungary GP, Ferrari has worked on small aerodynamic adjustments of the flat bottom of the car. Subtle changes, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, but that in theory will allow to better take advantage of the new suspension. It is a surgical exercise, almost desperate, because the combination of the new suspension and the adjustments in the soil seek to solve something more complex. The eternal Ferrari dilemma between aerodynamic load and tip speed. The car has historically been competitive in fast curves, but suffered in slow ones. In Hungary, a medium-low speed technical layout, this weakness becomes a nightmare. And in a team that has been in the shadow of its own expectations for more than a decade, that difference is everything. Thus we arrive in Hungary, not only with the hope of a decent result, but with the imperative need to verify whether the changes applied are enough to start a turn. Because if this new version of the SF25, improved by Diella and refined by Hamilton, does not deliver the expected performance, Ferrari runs the risk of losing much more than points in the classification. I could lose, once again, the confidence of those who believed that this would be the season of the final return. What distinguishes this transformation is not its speed, but its intention. Since Hamilton arrived in Ferrari, he has made it clear that his goal goes far beyond gaining races. He wants to leave a structural mark. He wants to model the organization in its own way, not as an act of ego but as a competitive need. It comes from an environment like Mercedes, where technical precision and teamwork led to historical hegemony. He knows how a champion team looks, and he will not settle for less. This transformation is already leaving palpable footprints in the internal dynamics of the team. Technical meetings, according to sources close to the Ferrari environment, have changed radically in tone and structure. Hamilton has brought a constant questioning philosophy. It is no longer enough for something to work. Now it is required to know why it works, how it can be improved, and what consequences each decision has in the global car configuration. This type of technical leadership is rare. Normally it comes from engineers. But in this case, it is the pilot who drives the conversation, who demands analytical depth and proactivity. Luca DL, as his trusted technical ally, has been key in translating this mentality into Ferrari's internal language. Instead of imposing their methods, it has begun to integrate them with those of the Italian team, looking for intersection points where the strengths of both worlds can be enhanced. It is a delicate task because Ferrari has a very entrenched technical identity. But apparently this time the change is not being resisted. There are signs that part of the team is adopting this new way of working. Because the results, although still modest, are already showing progressive improvements in the consistency of the car and the ability to reaction to track situations. And this is where the true impact of this transformation is glimpsed. If Ferrari manages to consolidate this new technical and strategic approach, it will no longer be a change of pilot or engineer. We will be facing a structural mutation, a redefinition of competitive DNA of the team, something that was not seen since the time of Schumacher, Todt, Braun and Byrne. A moment in which the pilot, technical leadership and operational direction worked with only one purpose and a single winning mentality. The Hungary GP will be a crucial test. Not so much for the points at stake but for what it symbolizes. Hungaroring is a technical circuit, which punishes the structural weaknesses of the car and demands a perfect synchrony between pilot and engineer. It is there that it can be clearly evaluated if DL's work in the tuning begins to be reflected in the consistency of the car, if the pilot-to-chippo relationship has reached a level of trust that allows to make brave decisions in real time, and if Ferrari as a whole is finally prepared to execute clean weekends, without avoidable errors or last-minute improvisations. In addition, the impact of this transformation is not limited to Ferrari. The rest of the grill is watching carefully, because a strong Ferrari is not just a sport threat. It is a political threat within the paddock. It is an organization with the power to incline technical decisions, attract talent and reconfigure the dynamics of the championship. If Hamilton manages to make Ferrari a serious and stable contender, other teams will have to react not only on the track, but also in their internal structures. All this leaves us in front of a season that can no longer be read only in terms of results. There is a greater history at stake, the construction of a new success cycle. One that is not shouted in the press conferences or celebrated on each podium. One that is forged in daily work, in the technical culture, in the choice of people who think in the long term. And this story, although as soon as it begins, has two of its most decisive protagonists in Lewis Hamilton and Luca Diella. Because in a sport where speed is everything, sometimes real change occurs without making noise. The Hungary Grand Prix is not just another quote from the calendar. It is one of those careers that, due to its technical nature and the history that surrounds it, usually marks inflection points. There, in that sinuous route and a few overtaking opportunities, where precision is everything and any error is paid expensive, it will be possible to observe sharply if Ferrari's silent transformation begins to translate into real performance. But the big question is still open. Is enough that Ferrari has changed to start winning? Or are we just witnessing the prologue of a much more complex reconstruction? The signals are there. The integration of Luca DL has already generated an impact on the way the car is analyzed and adapt. Hamilton's attitude is clearly different from that of his last years in Mercedes. Now we see him involved, challenging, willing to carry the responsibility of operating a project that is not yet finished. Vasseur, on the other hand, seems to have understood that giving Hamilton autonomy can be the only way to break with the old patterns of error and frustration. Everything indicates that a new competitive ecosystem is brewing, but there are variables that we still do not know. How will SF25 respond in extreme heat conditions and high degradation? Will the suspension modifications work in a constant lateral load circuit such as Hungaroring? Is Ferrari operationally prepared to execute a career without strategic or mechanical errors? And what about Leclerc, whose role within the team could be altered at the consolidation of Hamilton as a technical axis? Therefore, the Hungary GP may be that moment where the indications become certainty, or where it is clear that it is still missing to reach the necessary level. What happens that weekend will not only say much about Ferrari present, but about its ability to build a competitive future. Then the question is open. Will it be Hungary the beginning of a new red domain cycle or the most recent chapter in a history of recurrent frustrations?